Yeah, so I think basically, so York Community Energy, the way that we work is we work with householders, so homeowners, owner-occupiers, and we go and do retrofit assessments of people's homes. So some people want, very sort of deep retrofits. That's right. Some people want very sort of, deep retrofits like George's house, and some people want maybe not quite as far as that. And basically, there's a lot of, what we found is there's a lot of appetite already for deep retrofits. So, I don't think every single home in the country is going to end up with a deep retrofit. But there are certainly people who've got the financial capital now to do it and who want to do it. And so we're sort of helping them get engaged in the process now. And really that's just going to start the ball rolling. It's going to kickstart the market for retrofit in York. Hopefully we'll bring in the trades and get training online and things like that. And it's really just going to get everything moving and start building the momentum.
Thanks, Tom. Well, I think what the first point to make is that the opportunity is equally, if not massively, greater potential to actually influence through education of those students their attitudes on these wider issues than the buildings themselves. So we're here to talk about net zero and the focus is around buildings, but we're trying to have an equal focus on education for sustainable development and using the university estate as a resource for teaching as well. So we do quite a few projects with particularly geography students, some business students, and we try and use their accommodation, the teaching estate, as examples for them to use within their courses, and give them the chance to suggest improvements and have a look at the costs and benefits of those. The challenges of a transient population within those buildings, partly it restricts our ability to a very, very short window in the summer to actually enable us to do work to those buildings. And it's obviously very tricky to do deep and meaningful retrofit projects in the space of just a window of a few short weeks every year. So it needs a lot of intense planning, a lot of mobilisation, and unfortunately, because of the timings of the academic year, which we are trying to mobilise people at the busiest time of year for a lot of contractors who also rely on businesses and schools, particularly summer holiday periods, in order to get that work done.
Yeah, absolutely. So Helmsley Group have been based in York for 42 years or so now. We've got a large investment portfolio across the city. I think we've got about £200 million worth of commercial property in York and the surrounds. On the two elements we do, I'll just touch slightly on the development side of business. At the moment we've got two schemes on city centre projects which are aiming for net zero carbon. A couple of interesting lessons which we've learned undertaking those. The first one being the consideration from day one, right at the very start of the project, having to make consideration to not only deal with the developmental carbon but then the operational carbon going on down the line and engaging the tenant and the operator from the start. The interesting thing that has come out and really sea change over the last 18 months or so is that the funding and the way we managed to fund these developments is actually reaching a point now where we can get an additional premium for the properties being zero carbon to justify that excess spend. There's a lot of pressure from institutional funds coming out of London to invest in these green buildings, and it is making that viable. So that's been quite interesting for us. On our existing stock, it's been a real challenge to try and work out financially how we can justify greening up our portfolio, making it more sustainable. We've done the easy wins, so we've changed to our utility suppliers, we've done all the PV and installing electric vehicle charging points. When it comes to more fundamental changes, what we can actually do to the buildings to improve them, that's more of a wrangle. We've got our investor pressure on one side who want their rental returns, and we've got the tenants who frankly don't want to pay much more money towards a building that's not theirs. So a lot of our time has been we've done a full review of our portfolio to establish what we need to do and where the wins are and what's most going to be viable, and then agreeing with our investors and our tenants to put money aside to build a fund that we can then implement these changes.
Yeah, I mean, economies of scale are always good. There's very few circumstances where they're not. You know, there's multiple reasons for that. One, procurement. You can procure on scale, en masse for things. You can, two, share ideas. There's lots of fantastic ideas coming out of different cities. I think earlier, Paula, you said that you were collaborating with, was it Bath and Edinburgh. But you know, there's other cities like Bristol, for example, who are structuring things in their own way. They've got their Bristol City Leap project, which is a very forward-thinking mission for them to make Bristol net zero, and they've gone out for procurement in order to bring a contractor in effectively to be able to deliver that. We're actually sort of involved in the bidding process there, where hopefully community engagement and investment can come in as well. You've got other areas, you know, that are also focused on looking specifically at what their challenges are in their specific area, which can then be shared with other locations that are similar, because what is key in relation to net zero, and particularly when it comes to retrofitting, is that every different area has its own challenges. So in York, for example, it was mentioned again by you that it's got a very old building stock. There's a lot of listed buildings. In other areas it might be very rural, you might have a lot of people on oil, you might have a lot of, for example, tourists coming in and out of the area, which then impacts your carbon emissions in a completely different way. So, you know, there are lots of ways that people can collaborate in order to make things more effective, efficient, and to save money. From a financing perspective, scale is good, typically. I think I mentioned it briefly, I just gave one example where if you had a lot of sort of opportunities to invest in residential retrofit, that could be better than one opportunity, because if you have any one particular property that defaults, you know, that reduces your risk from an investment perspective, which in turn will reduce how much it costs to do, because the interest rate that's charged will be lower. So yeah, all good. Go big.
We've kind of been doing the assessments side of it and recommending measures that people can install, and then sort of what happens after that is a bit less well known at this point. What we're really hoping is to sort of forge some links within the city, talk to training colleges and things like that. There's a kind of a chicken and egg thing with supply and demand. So I think that the first thing that we're trying to do is prove that there's a demand for it, so that the market can then kind of follow, and we can bring in those skills. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And also just trying to engage with local tradespeople, which has been quite tricky actually, to get people interested, although I think that, again, the momentum's kind of building now, so I'm hoping that as time's go on, that's going to be a bit easier to deal with. But it's we'd like to do a sort of community training programme, get some local trades involved, but also really want to make sure that the next generation of tradespeople who are coming through the education system are also being told all the things that they need to know now.
Our planning officers, it's a big office, right, with lots of different type of people. They've got project people in there, they've got specialists in energy, specialists in building fabric, specialists in terms of conservation, all of whom go through their continual professional development. So that is absolutely in hand. We've also got Sean, who over the last year has been going into the planning department and explaining how it all fits together and how it works. And we're also developing policies to ensure that the planning department take into account that sustainability is critical. Conservation and sustainability have to work hand in hand. It's not you just build a green building and you sod what it looks like or how it works, and it's not that you keep the building in aspic and nobody can live in it because it's too cold and noisy. So all of that is going on, and I would say that the planning department, I've been with the council for just over 2 years, and I would say the planning department are making big strides into this area. And Becky Eads, who's head of planning, is really, really enthusiastic and making sure that her team come along with her, which is really important, because if you think of the journey that the planners have been on and how often they get hit over the head for that doesn't look nice, I don't like this, or you've not approved the other, the journey that she's taking them on is critical, that they come with enthusiasm and that they come looking for solutions.
It's lovely to hear Paula's comments on the changes that are happening at York. If I probably direct my response more generally in planning, and speak as somebody who has worked partly in planning in years gone by, I do think there is a significant gap that needs to be addressed if we're to really seriously address this issue in terms of attitudes and how people perceive their role, I guess, in those professions, rather than as a neutral arbiter, trying to actually promote something positive. And that is a fundamental shift in mindset that's required. At the moment, I mean, Paula's comment about one extreme being preserving buildings in aspic, I do think we are still too far towards that extreme across the whole country, and that's what needs to change if it's to be. Well, George, I think put it perfectly in some of his examples. It's at the moment it's very difficult, and you need it to be certainly at an individual level. You would need to be a very determined, methodical individual with a lot of time and commitment to spend to get anywhere meaningful, as George has obviously done. That's the same at a commercial level or an institutional level. It's hard work, and it needs to be easy work.
Say that I think that this is where kind of local authority and LEPs come in really to help to actually advise businesses. You know, I think that if you've got someone independent coming in to advise them, they trust it potentially more than somebody that's providing them with the kit. They feel that they're getting something that is, you know, holistic and hopefully the right answer for them. I know that I did a bit of work once in Leeds for the Leeds LEP, and they've got a specific advisory service that's for SMEs and how they improve the energy efficiency of their buildings. I'm sorry, I don't know if you've got a similar thing in York, but brilliant if you have. And I think, you know, it's been really successful. There might be financial models that you can put in place that deal with, you know, payback of that advice. Perhaps once you've, you know, instigated the work, you perhaps might be able to get money back through a share of savings, for example. So a sort of repayable advisory service. It's a mix, I think, but I do think it needs to come from government. There needs, you know, as I said before, we need policies in place to make this happen. You know, and I think it's also local authorities, you know, they, I think, need to be given the opportunity to be able to drive it forward in the locality to make sure that the right solutions are put in place. And, you know, in relation to financing, I talked about that kind of in my presentation about, you know, potentially different opportunities for that. It does need to be linked to the building itself, as opposed to individuals. You know, that could be done through kind of a carbon pricing linked to energy efficiency, which then obviously would have an impact when you sold your property. There are various things that could be looked at. Certainly Green Finance Institute has kind of recently published reports in relation to how you might be able to finance retrofit, but the common thread amongst all of it is we need policy.
You know, what we're seeing, as I said before, is there is an appetite for retrofit from homeowners. There are people who want to do it, and it would be great if we could support them financially to do that. I think that the signal of the direction from the government is quite clear that they're not really that bothered about retrofit on the owner-occupier side, and they're sort of fully committing to heat pumps. Not that I'm against heat pumps, but you know, again, it's all about a mix. You know, retrofitting and heat pumps is a good combination. But I think, you know, if we're going to be pragmatic, it looks like there's not going to be much funding for it from the government. And we've had the Green Homes grant, which failed quite spectacularly. That was really the opportunity, and yeah, it was poorly executed, and I think they really missed a trick there. So, you know, hopefully something like that comes along again in future, but I wouldn't hold my breath, basically.
If you've got the money and you can do it and you've got the will, get on with it. Certainly inside of the council, where we've got the opportunity, where we've got the funding, where we've got the skills, where we've got the people who can do the delivery, we're doing it. The housing associations right the way across the city are doing it and getting on with it. Something that the York Commission, the Climate Commission's doing over the next couple of years is seeing how we can get people involved in moving to green energy, making sure that their boilers are as efficient as they possibly are, and making sure that they get insulated, whichever type it is. And I know that that is baby steps, but the more we can move across, the more we can move the dial, and the more we can make it sexy, interesting for everybody to go in the same direction. So I'd say it's everybody's, and if government would give us a lead and the money, even better.
Thanks, Paula.
Well, for large organisations, it's and for people like housing associations, local authorities, where you've got lots of properties, the danger is being overwhelmed with too much data. You know, smart metering is well established now. You can very easily, with a couple of hundred properties, you can very easily end up with millions and millions of data points coming in every month. Unless you've got the ability and time to do something with those, they're effectively useless. And you can't see the wood for the trees. You've got to be able to quantify. You know, in order to take this seriously and actually deliver anything meaningful, you have to be able to quantify where your emissions are coming from in order to target any action in the most cost-effective and meaningful way. And so some element of metering is absolutely vital. Sometimes that itself comes with significant savings that you can then channel back into more productive work. So electricity meters and electricity sub-metering are the most long-established technologies to enable quite a fine degree of monitoring. Gas came later, and then more recently water has a range of options for very low cost metering options. And then within that, the technologies to monitor temperature, humidity, sound, light levels have really dropped in price in the last 10, 15 years especially. So it's now very cost effective to monitor, for example, room by room, at individual room level conditions, and enable knock-on actions as a result of those conditions. So, for example, a lot of the emphasis on heat pumps for home heating neglects the fact that for most of the day, most of the rooms in an average house don't actually need to be heated at all. There's an awful lot of wasted energy in millions and millions of homes, office buildings, commercial premises, heating space where there's nobody there, sometimes for the entire day, but those are heated to the same extent as the occupied areas. So metering, monitoring, targeting really enables a much more honed, sensible approach to what is it you're actually trying to achieve with this technology.
Okay, we are not going to get to utopia in one big step. We're not going to move from where we are unless you are as brave as George was in one big step and unless you've got deep pockets. So rather than thinking of how we get to utopia, how we do a deep retrofit in every single of the 90,000 homes that we've got in York, what steps can we take? How can we slowly get there? How can we also produce exemplars, talk about them, whether they're new ones, whether they're retrofit ones, whatever they are, so that we build the appetite up. You heard earlier from Denise, it's 300 and how much?
37 million.
Sorry, 37 million to retrofit the council houses. We don't have 37 million pounds to do it. So we're doing baby steps in it. We'll do the insulation, we'll do the better and more efficient boilers, etc., etc. So that will be happening. We will lobby government and keep lobbying government to see how we change the policies and see how we can increase the funding. And with everybody in this room and the 210,000 people that live in York, you have two options of voting on it. One, you vote every 4 or 5 years on who's setting the policies and doing the policies. And two, you vote every day with the amount of money in your pocket as to what you're buying and what you're doing and how you can move people towards these technologies. So I would just say that again, we're all in this. You cannot look for one body, whether that's just the government, local government, housing associations, to solve this. We've all got to be doing our bit to get there together.
There's very little that local authorities can do in isolation. There's an awful lot that central government can do without necessarily directly funding a lot of this. But I was quite shocked in the latest budget to see that, for example, VAT wasn't being brought into the mix on this in a lot more considered way. So a lot of the materials that are required for the type of work that we're talking about are fully VAT rated, and we have all sorts of weird VAT reductions and exemptions in this country, are going back in some cases centuries to things that really are completely unjustified now. So we pay a reduced rate of VAT on the fuel, which is causing a lot of the problems, for example, but the full rate of VAT on insulation products, which to me is absolutely balmy. Local authorities can't do anything about that. That lies with central government, not necessarily in the form of handouts, more grants. You know, there would be a lot more will to do this kind of stuff if people had an easy access to lower cost materials, and we've got a great DIY tradition in this country as well, and that would make that easier for homeowners to start doing more themselves.
A lot of people don't actually know what to do. So, you know, George's quick fix of the skirting board, which you mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, good idea. But how many people would think about that? And you know, I think there are communication opportunities there for the local authority potentially that could come through, you know, little tips that even come through with your, you know, communications that come from the council saying, have you thought about this? Do it, type thing. This is what it could save you. And that those little snippets, as you say, start to engage people, and then from there it starts to sort of snowball over time because, you know, you engage them.
So, little plug for the York Community Energy website. We've got a sort of handy hints guide on there for various things you can do, different levels of ambition for, you know, retrofit, right from really simple, cheap measures, draft proofing, you know, bigger insulation measures. And also we do sort of regular articles about various other things you can do as well. So, yeah, and I would just say as well, so we do kind of 2 levels of retrofit assessment. So we do the whole house assessment for people who want to do deep retrofit. We do home energy checkups, and the home energy checkups I think are a great way to kind of get started on that retrofit journey. Like Charlotte said, some people don't have a clue, don't know where to start. So really that can be your kind of first step into the world of retrofit, and just kind of educate you about what it's all about, maybe find little things like gaps in skirting boards and all that kind of stuff, and really just kind of start you on that journey. So there's a great social enterprise in Manchester called Carbon Co-op, and they do similar things to what we do with retrofit, but they're a bit sort of further along in the journey. And they did a bit of research, and actually, when they asked people, you know, why do you want to retrofit your home? Like you say, the money thing is fairly low down the list, and actually the thing that comes out, aside from reducing emissions, is comfort. And people actually really value having a warm, comfortable home to live in with good air quality. And I think, yeah, maybe that's something that gets a bit lost in the debate. But because we kind of have this one metric, you know, money, that's the only thing that we can sort of tangibly measure. So yeah, if we can come up with better ways to measure the other things as well, then I think that would change the equation, definitely.
We used to receive a wad of posters every few months from the Energy Saving Trust and the Carbon Trust, and it would be things like, you know, switching this light off will save enough to cook 2 slices of toast every hour or whatever it is. You know, it doesn't connect to people in a way that we need to be achieving. There's a lot of really interesting behavioural economics research around this area, and I hope that we've been moving quite quickly now towards a situation where this is just the right thing to do. And whatever you can afford to do, whatever time you can spare to put into doing your bit for that is just the right thing to do.
People learn, speak, understand in different ways, and what I'm hearing is stop doing the one size fits all. Let's slice the message up and get as many people to actually move forward as we can, rather than keeping going for more in that line. So I do think we're violently agreeing.
Yeah. A lot of the conversation today is around people who can afford to retrofit, or people, you know, people who are already sort of in that kind of mindset. And you're right, there's lots of other people who are very concerned about money,
yeah,
because they haven't got enough money to live on. And obviously a lot of the things we're talking about today is all from the viewpoint of people who have got that money. So yeah, there's a whole other side of it there. And obviously, and I know that your council is already doing a lot in that sphere, and you know, with the home upgrade grants and all that kind of stuff to help those people as well. So, but you know, at the end of the day, yes, people want enough money to live on, but they also don't want to live in a cold and drafty and mouldy house. So it's all, yeah, we can fix all of these things basically.
Yes, the answer is to that.
Excellent.
We don't at the moment, but that's a good idea. We don't accredit landlords in the same way that we did in the past, and we don't sort of publish lists of approved landlords. We provide most of our first year accommodation to students ourselves, or through a small amount of subletting. I think that's a really useful answer. The problem in York at the moment is there's an extreme shortage of any suitable property. So unfortunately, that works against that goal. I do think, in the same way that, for example, if we're renting a property to sublet, we have very, very stringent approach to fire safety compared to the norm. We could look at doing a lot more there as well, yeah. Yeah, I've got great concerns about the quality of UK construction generally, and it's not getting any better. One of the symptoms of Brexit is that we've lost a lot of Eastern European builders, and I would argue that they were working probably to a higher standard a lot of the time, unfortunately, than many British tradespeople. And that's a big challenge, really big challenge. The vocational trades need to be more highly valued in society. we've had to start our own apprenticeship scheme in order to fill gaps that we were seeing that couldn't be filled by some specialist contractors because of concerns over quality. So it's not an easy question to answer, and it's going to take many years. But those vocational trades positions needs to be incentivised. The training needs to be more rigorous. The certification schemes need to be more rigorous, and the manufacturers need to step up and take a bigger role in certifying installations of some of these key technologies as well. We're doing a project at the moment. We've invested a lot of money on Haxby Road in the sports facilities there. One of the projects we're looking at in the next few months is LED floodlighting retrofit project. And the way we're financing that is over basically an extended maintenance contract and spreading the capital cost over the first 3 or 4 years, with the maintenance contract spread over the remaining 4 years. And it's basically just due to capital constraints, so we've spread it over a longer period. And obviously there are savings, but there are also savings within the maintenance for that kind of thing. I think for sports facilities that include swimming pools, they're usually a major driver of energy bills and carbon emissions. So there are some really key things that are specific to swimming pools. Dry sports centres are typically a lot easier. There's a lot of space heating and then water heating. So there are some really targeted, specific measures around sports facilities that there's quite a good body of case studies and technological appraisals for those things. And I am happy to talk about our experience of implementing some of those if anybody's interested.